wanted to ask locals in New Zealand to reflect on the mosque attacks in Christchurch on March 15th, 2019. Has this attack been forgotten? Could such a tragedy bring any positives? Did the attacks affect the non-Muslim community? 15 days, 15 videos, marking the 2-year anniversary of the day that shook New Zealand. This is what they had to say. So the first question is, do you remember where you were or how you felt when you first heard about the Christchurch attacks?
I was actually at school. At that time I was just at school and just returned back home and heard the news, and I couldn't even believe it. It was very shocking, I would say. I just came to New Zealand maybe a few months ago, before the attack, and it was very shocking to hear the news.
No, I don't remember, but I remember later on that night I found it hard to sleep, so then I just cried to sleep because I was just so scared. That was one of my nightmares, really, and it actually happened. Yeah.
I know exactly where I was and what I was doing. I'm a high school teacher, and it was a teacher-only day, and so I was in my office with other work colleagues, and I got a call from my husband who told me that there was an attack in Christchurch, and to get our kids. Given it was a teacher-only day, they were not at school with me, and they are teens, so I had to immediately reach out to them. But how I felt was really, really a huge impact, because I had already had a threat for that particular day for March 15th, and I had reported it to the police. And as a result, and it was a threat to Hamilton, and the police had assured me that we were safe and that not to worry. So I had an extra fear and really panic that if an attack had happened in Christchurch, that an attack may be happening in Hamilton at the same time.
Yes, I was on the bus home after university. It was a Friday. I believe it was about 2:15, and I recall this because I was on the bus and I was riding it with my friend. And I remember I'm always on Twitter, so I was on Twitter going through my stuff, my normal trending, and I saw that in New Zealand, Christchurch and shooting was trending, and I clicked on it, and it was like pretty much a live update of what was going on. I think I just felt numb.
Would you say that xenophobia or intolerance is something that's common in New Zealand, or you as a Maori Muslim have experienced?
As a Maori Muslim, I think that that we've always been inclusive of other cultures and people. I think that I've never seen, although in the early days, I could go back to when I was a child, that there were only Europeans and Maori and maybe a handful of Chinese and Indians that I knew, that I grew up. And everyone in Hamilton knew them. But as you know, so things were different back in those days. But I think these days we're more inclusive. We've always been inclusive of different people, different races, and what they are. We marry into them, and that's quite openly.
No, I don't think that it is common in New Zealand, which I haven't really faced through any racism or any Islamophobia or anything, which I'm quite happy about. And I consider New Zealand as my home, so and I wouldn't even expect any xenophobia or any racism in this country.
Intolerance, so in New Zealand, I think intolerance is not as bad as it used to be. There is definitely still intolerance, yes, in New Zealand. But when I think of the changes and the growth that New Zealand has gone through since like 9/11, for example, when I see what it was like then in comparison to now, I can walk down the street and people will smile at me. You know, people will start a conversation with me. I like to do a little bit of DIY, and I go in a Mitre 10 and they always love my scarves that I wear, and it strikes up a conversation and things like that. But then for the shooting to happen, there's got to be intolerance, doesn't there? We do need to, as a country, I suppose, be more aware of the intolerance and the behaviour that some people do, regardless, even if it's, you know, it might not be faith-based. As a country, I think we've learnt a lot. You never know it all. We're all learning. I'm hoping that if people can see that as Muslims, we've gone through such a hard struggle of the shooting and how we've reacted to it and wanting peace and forgiveness and wanting to communicate and build those bridges with everyone. The reaction of Kiwis to that shooting was just phenomenal, really. You know, to see the outpouring of love. There's got to be only a few that are intolerant, really, when you see the love that poured out from the whole country. So I don't think it's as bad as it used to be.
I feel like people are more, I guess, educated, like culturally educated, so they are more understanding in terms of like whenever we fast or like whenever we pray, I feel like people are more accepting.
I've definitely encountered a few. Here's the thing, I think we're all so hesitant to label something racist or xenophobic because we don't want to believe that these occurrences happen regularly to people in New Zealand. But I would say I've definitely had instances where I would think that if I was someone of privilege, you know, whether that's race or skin color, then I wouldn't be going through the position that I went through. It was just, when it was happening, I didn't think much of it until I thought about the interaction that's happened, and I go like, that seems a bit off, or it seems like something that shouldn't be happening regularly, kind of thing.
Do you feel that the way in which Muslims are viewed, represented, and treated has changed in New Zealand since the happening of March 15th?
Yeah, the general population and how we're treated is significantly different. And so when I go to the grocery store now, I'm encountered not just with people, but they're smiling and they're interacting and greeting, and that didn't happen prior to the attacks. And students, like my students, feel, comfortable asking more questions or why are things happening in the sense of themselves as well. And they are more vocal about when things are not, they're not looking the other way. If somebody's doing something or saying something that is socially wrong, they will question it. And I think the average New Zealander does as well. I think that New Zealand responded, the general population, the vast majority of people responded in the way that all of us believed from the moment we arrived in New Zealand that New Zealand would respond. Those of us who've migrated to New Zealand have chosen New Zealand because of it's willing to speak up when things are wrong. And there is a history of that in New Zealand. And so we weren't surprised that New Zealand responded that way. What became apparent to us is that there was a lot of people that bought into what international media had been portraying of our community and had looked at that rather than looked at their neighbors. And the same thing, we were quietly, probably as a community, going about our business, and now we realize that we need to be more vocal as well.
There's definitely a better understanding of Islam and the way that Muslims live, and I think as well as like this social cohesiveness in communities where people embraced those who had been really affected by the tragedy that happened on March 15th, 2 years ago now. And, you know, it did result in some really good outcomes in terms of how those people saw them as human rather than as some other. And I think that's something, that humanizing element is really important because it helps us all remember that we're in this together, and with the pandemic going on right now as well, we need to remember that more than ever, to be kind to one another and to treat each other with respect, and also to look out for one another. With a lot of things, I feel like the pandemic did show the good and bad side. So there were benefits in terms of everyone's kind of working together, but at the same time, those negative outcomes are really amplified, such as the rampant racism all over the world towards Asian people. And of course, as people mostly know, I hope, some of those Asians are also Muslim. And so therefore, it does make it a lot more difficult when the realities of being, you know, a non-white person is constantly lived every day, and you feel it not just where you're living now, but across the world. You know, because like all of this is happening right now, and with everyone working together, but you can still see that there are people who don't necessarily want to conform to that, or don't necessarily believe in those same values. And that's always going to be difficult, but I think we have to remember to work together at the end of the day because we want what's best for everyone.
I believe so. Many people did not even know about Muslims or Islam, and they got to know. That's one of the best things that happened after the attack. It broke my heart, but seeing people learning about Islam and even reading about it, going to mosques to check out on Muslims, having this sense of community and unity that's there is just, you know, the only good thing that happened after the attack, and I'm really grateful for it.
Do you feel that the way the public media portrays and represents Muslims has changed? You can talk about international media or New Zealand.
I feel like Muslim representation in TV is still a bit like, oh, they're the outsiders, they're the terrorists, or we have to watch out for them, which shouldn't be like that, especially after the shooting happened, because it does make other people, not only Muslims, aware of it, but it makes us feel a bit scared as well.
I see that after the attack, especially like in Ramadan, we can see more media representative. They try, put effort to go along to the activities in our daily life. Yeah, so I think that in New Zealand generally, the media are trying to send message to the public through their news, through their commentary and all that. So I find it's helped. You know, it helps to get a better understanding about the life of us Muslim in New Zealand, and also in our perspective towards politics and the current affairs and whatever is happening in the world.
I believe so. I believe that as the world, or at least nowadays, people are starting to become more progressives and more aware of things that are happening as we become more connected, I believe that people are generally more aware that these occurrences are happening, and I'd like to hope that because people are more aware, that they are able to stop or recognize when these things are happening. At least I hope that as well for myself, that I'm able to recognize when these things are happening to me or the people around me.
Do you believe that the events of March 15th have brought a stronger sense of togetherness/compassion in New Zealand?
I definitely do. I feel like now people aren't afraid to ask questions to Muslims, to ask them the things that makes them feel more, that will make them feel more comfortable. Like, I remember my co-workers asking me, Arina, can you tell me about halal? What does that mean? Can you tell me about praying times? Why do you pray at certain times? Why do you wear your hijab? You know, the questions that people want to ask, but they're just afraid to. But the awareness of like the Muslim religion from the Christchurch attack has actually made them feel more comfortable to ask, because it's out there, but people have different experiences, and that's really important because everyone experiences their life differently as a Muslim, and I think we have to take into consideration of the personal needs, because that's what's important. And I'm really glad that I'm living in a world where it is okay to be different. It's okay to have different needs than other people.
I think New Zealand had it before, I'm sure. I could feel that when I landed here in New Zealand, how I got settled here, had my third kid here, the love and, the community feeling was already there. But after this, as I said, people knew that what it is to be a Muslim and why are we living like a Muslim here. And we all come with one dream, better life in New Zealand. So I think, there are lots of positive side after the attack, but thinking about the family they had to go through, it's really sad for them. And I think they are the martyrs of the positive that came out of somebody had to sacrifice for us to open our eyes and see what's the reality and why is it happening in the world. And after this, I think people are more compassionate and tolerant and more understanding.
I wouldn't really use the word positive to describe an event like that, but I think so. I feel like Muslim people in general have more of a voice, especially, I feel like people are more, eager to listen to what they say more now. I feel like it kind of brought us together in a way, because after I think 2 days after the whole event, I went to a vigil and we had this whole 5 minutes of silence thing in the Basin Reserve. And one of the quotes I've heard from someone was something along the lines of what the terrorists try to do was they try to cause panic and cause chaos and try to split the country apart in a way. But what he failed to realize was that what I actually did was brought everyone else stronger together and kind of formed bonds rather than breaking bonds. And I felt like that was a huge positive that that came out of the event, but I don't know, I don't really like using that word,
Unfortunately, we lost how many, 34 people, and it was really a sad tragedy, but in a way, what the good outcome is, again, I'll say that the more people, more public members come approach and try to get to know us, the Muslim community, and also they show that how they're concerned and they share the awareness of safety to a Muslim community, to the mosque, and also meaning when they show their concern of safety for us, a Muslim community, that for me that includes whole wide society, not just Muslim, every people across the community in this country.
I believe after this attack I stayed in that zone of not knowing what to think for about a couple of days. I just wanted to zone out and try to find the good in things, and I believe that only one of the best things that happened was the unity. We came back, we came together, and I believe I was welcomed in New Zealand before I come here, but seeing my classmates at school trying to take care of me, and even the sense of protectiveness, I don't usually enjoy it, but this time I felt, it's brotherhood. They're trying to console us, they're trying to make us feel home and safe, and that was a very good thing. And I believe that the attack wasn't just for Muslims, not only Muslims were affected, it's the whole of New Zealand nation. I felt that we shared this sorrow moment so that we can share the happy moments. If we don't share the hardships, it's really hard to say that we are a nation in the happy times only.